One of my favorite aspects of Tears of the Kingdom has gotta be the Light Dragon. Her presence in the story really answered the age-old question, would you love me if I was a worm, with a resounding yes. After finishing the game, I was pretty desperate to find some art of the Light Dragon to decorate my desk with. I really wanted a figurine of some sort, but couldn't find anything online, at least nothing I could afford, so I decided to make something myself. I got a lot of love for the figure that I ultimately made, but also a lot of questions on how I made it and requests for a DIY video. So even though this is usually more of a theory channel, I decided to give the people what they want. In this video, I'll be going into how I built my polymer clay light dragon. I do want to start off with a disclaimer that while I'm a pretty crafty person, I'm not a craft YouTuber, so I know this is by no means a perfect tutorial. But I thought it was worth making if it would help someone make their own light dragon. I also want to give some credit because some of my inspiration came from this video by North of the Border, who is a super talented artist who built a Dinral figure. His techniques and tools were a little more advanced than what I had on hand, so this is really just sort of a lo-fi version of that. The supplies I used for this project were tin foil, Sculpey, armature wire, and shiny and glow-in-the-dark paint. More on that later. The first stage of the build was to create a model out of tin foil and then wrap it with a base layer of gray clay. Polymer clay can sometimes have issues baking when it's super thick, so having this tinfoil on the inside serving as a core helped to thin it out and make it easier and quicker to bake. I had to make thin sheets of gray clay to wrap around the foil, and as you might be able to tell here, I kind of did this on a whim without a great setup. So for example, I didn't have a rolling pin, so I just ended up using a candle to flatten out the clay. But it worked. Once I had a sort of base assembled, the next step was to add the spikes. I used a regular clay and a translucent clay and mixed them together to create that sort of crystal effect that we see in the game. The translucent clay, when baked, allows for a little light to shine through, which I thought was super cool. Then, once I had the spikes placed, it was time to add the most time-consuming part of the whole project, the scales. For this, I just rolled up a bunch of teeny tiny balls of clay and placed them individually across the body. This part took a lot of work, but I really liked the way the scales looked in the end, and it was certainly better than just having a flat coat of white clay on top of the gray. As you can see, I've sped this part up a lot so that you don't have to sit through several hours of this. Shout out to my fellow Zelda tubers, as I was watching a lot of their videos as I did this. Once the scales were done, the base of the body was pretty much complete, which meant it was time to add on the accessories. This part included the legs, and for those I basically had to mold little hands and nails, stuff the arms with armature wire, and bake them separately. You may have noticed I only ended up making 2 sets of legs, even though in the game she really has 3, because I realized the scale was slightly off and it just wouldn't look right. But I still think it looks pretty good with 2, even if it's not totally game accurate. The horns had a similar process. Here's what my first test of the horns looked like. For those, I used the translucent clay again. Then I had to make the mane and the eyes, which of course I forgot to film, and once everything was all put together, I put her in the oven. I realized there wasn't a great way to bake her on her side without it getting squished, so I had to get a little creative with the setup in the oven, and kind of wedged her in between the baking racks and supported her with tinfoil. We did lose a leg in the process, but I was able to do some quick surgery afterwards to fix that. Once she was all baked, she was pretty much done. There were just a few final touches I wanted to make. First, I had to figure out how I wanted to display her. Because of the pose, she wasn't able to lay flat, and since I didn't want to hang her on the wall, I was able to find these cool transparent doll stands that I assembled at different heights to support her. And then the last touch was to add on some paint. For the horns, spikes, and claws, I added this super cool Deco art glow-in-the-dark paint. As you can see, I put this paint on pretty thick as it does dry clear-ish, but it glows teal, so it would glow like it does in the game. And this is what it looks like when you turn the lights off. I think it looks so cool. This part might be my favorite detail of the entire project. And then finally I added some shiny gold paint to the yellow pieces so they felt a little more textured. And that's about it. I'm really happy with how it came out, and it was a really fun craft for me to do. I'm not an artsy crafty YouTuber, of course, but I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.